There is a lot of fear about AI in the future of work, but at the same time, a lot of the work that people think that they want to do involves sitting for 8 hours behind a computer, moving information around. Nobody really wants to do that work. We want to connect more. We want to be more creative. We want to exercise our judgment. And I think used well, this is a moment that we will be able to start doing that a lot more. And I think that's a very bright future. My optimism, my positivity in all of this comes from the fact that if you look at all prior technological revolutions, after a bit of a rocky period in figuring things out, things have gotten substantially better for everyone. And I don't see why this would be any different. There are certainly risks, and we need to navigate those risks. But at the end of the day, this is a really powerful capability that we will get to deploy to solve the problems that we care about. And I don't see how that won't end up benefiting everyone in a way that we can't even fathom today. The moment is now, and so it makes sense to commit oneself to this transition because, quite frankly, companies need it. The world needs it, and it takes a lot of focus. All of us working in the space are working harder than we ever have before, quite frankly. And so it makes sense to make it sort of like the number one commitment during this time. AI is helping every individual in the company do significantly more than they could before, and therefore the whole company is moving forward faster. And we are seeing this. We're seeing growth that's faster than before. We're seeing things being shipped faster than they have before.
That was Matt Geleta, head of AI enablement at Harrison AI, and why he believes that AI will make us not just better at work, but also better as humans. Matt is about as deep into implementing AI as anyone can get, and he shares some remarkable insight on what works and what doesn't when you're building an AI-native organisation. Harrison AI is one of Australia's leading AI companies. Its radiology model not just passed the UK's toughest certification exam, but it beat every single frontier lab in the process. And after it raised $100 million US in a Series C, they're taking the fight from Australia to the US. Now, you might think that an AI startup gets a free pass to becoming AI native. Well, it doesn't. The pace of change means that even Harrison is racing to keep up. So Matt has started a dedicated team whose entire job is making the company AI native. And since AI native speakers exists to work out exactly how a company becomes AI native, I had to get him on the pod. My top 3 highlights are: 1, Matt sharing their model to make a company AI native, powered by his ops and enablement team with a broader remit and skill set than pretty much any other team I've come across. He walks us through the process they've made on infrastructure, knowledge, and AI tooling, all while upskilling every single person in the company. 2, Harrison's biggest unlock was giving their agents deep context with a knowledge graph built from their emails, wiki, and meeting notes. After a few false starts bolting AI onto existing tools, they built their own, Pensive, and now it lets them write tenders and automate business cases without even leaving the comfort of Slack. And 3, Matt's personal belief that technology can make us better humans, not just more productive ones. He lives this belief every day with his personal agents that track what he's written, said on calls, and offer improvement. So, for instance, he was recently called up by his agent for unintentionally snubbing a junior colleague after repeatedly moving a meeting. Another agent sends him articles on topics it's identified he could know more about. So, welcome to episode 2 of AI Native Speakers with Matt Geleta from Harrison AI. Enjoy. Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us on AI Native Speakers.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
As a way of intro, your career started where you'd expect for someone who's smart and well qualified. You studied mathematics at Oxford, and during that time, I think we saw a little bit of an indication of the direction you were going. You actually studied artificial intelligence and making algorithms faster, and that was the focus of your PhD before you left to go into startups. And you were a launcher for Bear, and you also went into management consulting before joining Harrison AI. And you were head of operations there, and you've been doing a very good job of operating because Harrison are absolutely flying. You recently raised a Series C, and your product is incredible. A brilliant example of an AI startup in Australia kind of doing better than the big foundation labs. Your medical imaging product is in 40 NHS trusts, every emergency department in Hong Kong, more of half of Australia's radiologists use it. Time even named you the world's top health tech company last year. And I saw this week on your LinkedIn that you've released a model which in FRCB2B, which if you're not a radiologist sitting exams is the exam that radiologists have to do in the UK. And you passed it, beating the foundation models, which is really, really remarkable. And so, first of all, you were the COO at Harrison, and now you've got a role that maybe something to do with AI changing jobs. It just says building an AI native business. So, Matt, welcome to the podcast. And first of all, can you please tell us, what you do?
No, thanks for having me. I do have a formal title. My formal title is Director of AI Operations and Enablement, but that is not what I have on LinkedIn. I mean, zooming out a little bit, AI is changing a lot about how companies operate, how companies are built, all the way down to workforce planning, organizational structures. And this is just a little nod to that fact. We at Harrison are very AI forward. We have been operating in healthcare AI since the beginning. I mean, this is our bread and butter. This is what we do. But we're also AI forward internally. And we have positioned ourselves to really embrace what technology is available now. And that includes at the role definition level. So if you look at what is the history of organizational structures and role definitions, I mean, this dates back to military origins where we needed mechanisms to be able to coordinate many, many different people across geographies in an environment where information is quite hard to transport. It needs to go up through chains of command. It needs to be consolidated and synthesized by layers of people. And in this structure, it makes sense to have very narrowly defined roles, people who are accountable for very small, very clearly defined things. We also need titles that indicate hierarchies or chain of command, so you know what decision authority someone has. And this was adopted by companies globally, but in the age of AI, information synthesis, transport doesn't need to go through layers of people. And in this world, roles become more general. Sort of organizational ranking is less important. And so it does have implications for things like job titles. And so while I officially have a AI operations and enablement remit and job title, I've chosen not to put that down just for the moment because I can see the space that we're in is one in which all of this is kind of being reinvented.
First of all, you have an AI role helping implement AI in the company at an AI company. You've gone full AI. I just wanted to understand, where that commitment comes from.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, taking a step back from this particular moment, I've been in AI adjacent fields for a very, very long time. As you said, during my master's, I studied how to accelerate the machine learning process. This was at the same time of the sort of deep learning revolution, where deep learning was the word of the day. I went to the initial presentations by DeepMind, where they released their sort of, I think it was called deep dreaming at that time, their sort of image models. It had been clear to me for a very long time that at some point we would get to a point where in the digital realm, machines are able to compete with humans at a vast range of sort of human level competencies. That has always been quite clear to me, and we can talk about the theoretical reasons why, but the question was one of sort of timing and sequencing and speed. And for a long time, this was not happening as quickly as it has in the past several years. In particular, narrow domains, it was happening. And so within the healthcare space, within radiology, where Harrison AI works, the technology's been there for a long time to transform how radiology works through computer vision models, sort of good old-fashioned AI. And so the case for being part of the Harrison journey since the early days has been very, very clear. In recent times, it's been clear that we're moving to that next phase where a much broader range of capabilities is now tackleable through AI. And I don't think this will last forever, but it's certainly the moment is now. And so it makes sense to commit oneself to this transition because, quite frankly, companies need it. The world needs it. And it takes a lot of focus. All of us working in the space are working harder than we ever have before, quite frankly. And so it makes sense to make it sort of like the number one commitment during this time.
It does really feel like a moment, doesn't it? Every single model release, there is something new which you're able to do with it, which wasn't possible before. I look at just the past year that I've been helping companies implement AI. And the automations I did at the beginning are just laughable compared to what's possible now. And so there's this catch up going on where companies are so far behind what the cutting edge is, because I feel organizations are moving much slower than the technology right now. And so there's just this delta, which it sounds like you're working on closing, starting at Harrison, which is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I've had the great fortune during this sort of process of speaking to many people at many different companies at all stages of the sort of AI adoption curve, all the way from really AI native businesses to large multinationals that have still banned AI. And, in those cases, some of the most AI forward people in those companies, even senior people, are doing things such as purchasing second laptops to run AI and copy pasting across or emailing across because they see the value. But what's really, really clear is that those who are not taking very active measures to start adopting it are very clearly falling behind in terms of speed, execution speed. And so there is a real cost to waiting. There is a cost to being too fast as well, because as you said, you build things that get outdated, but there's a significant cost to waiting too long. And so I think it is important that that this is taken very, very seriously. And I think quite soon, every company will be taking this very, very seriously if they're not already. Most, I think, already are.
Perfect. That's a really good link into the next section, which is about your principles at Harrison of working with AI. How do you guide your work with AI? How do you decide if it's something which an agent should do or you leave it for a human?
So one aspect of being AI forward and trying to be close to the front of this change is that there isn't a clearly defined playbook. There are some emerging best practices and principles, but largely everyone out the front is sort of crafting this and developing it as they're going. And so these principles, the principles that we use, are sort of not set in stone, and they're things that we're defining as we go along. But there's several things that stand out in the way we're approaching it at Harrison. So one of the principles that we have in mind here is we see AI forwardness as something that we want to do with all of our people. There's some companies that are approaching AI as, small teams owning automations and doing it to the company. But we envision a truly AI forward future is one in which all staff are AI fluent. We would be hiring for AI fluent people. We would entrust all staff with powerful AI tooling. And so in the way we're designing this process, we're designing it such that everybody becomes AI enabled, and it's baked into hiring processes. It's baked into everything we do. So that's one principle. Another principle here is that, again, AI can be treated as sort of like a bolt-on to existing ways of working, existing processes. And sure, you can get some benefits from leveraging tools in that way. But actually, the real benefit often comes from rearranging processes such that they can be done agentically end to end. So again, back to the sort of hierarchy, organizational hierarchy topic that I mentioned at the start. In a process that involves many human handoffs, one way to use AI is to sort of optimize the task that each person is doing, but maintain the handoffs, and that becomes very inefficient. But if you reorganize work so that there are fewer handoffs between people, you can then use AI agentically across the whole process. And so another principle that we're adopting is we are rearranging accountabilities, we're rearranging processes such that there are fewer handoffs along the process between people, such that in the end state we'll be able to automate end to end. And we're getting there. So there are many processes that are still very sort of traditional. Some are becoming more agentic, but the end state is as agentic as possible. There's some vanilla principles, data privacy, compliance, all of these things are absolutely essential. And so there's some data that our AIs never touch. I think that would be standard across almost any company. We take it very, very seriously. But in general, we're erring on the side of let's test the limits of what we can do with AI and assume it can do a lot more than many people would think it can do, because often it surprises you. And I think that's where the real gold emerges, where you stress test, you assume it can do far more than people typically expect, and very often it can.
Yeah. Awesome. So your principles of being AI forward, you want to get everyone involved. You're rearranging the work and in particular, looking at avoiding bottlenecks by reducing the number of handoffs while not doing anything bad with the data or compliance, which I imagine is particularly important in medical world. Those are great principles. I love it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think, sorry, go for it.
Well, I was going to double click into the people side. So you want to get everyone on AI, but I'm finding using AI in work is maybe a slightly different skill set, which the role they were hired for was. It's much more systems thinking. How are you finding adapting people's roles to AI? Like, are you able to teach them systems thinking, or am I just thinking about it the wrong way?
You're not thinking about it the wrong way. I think it is a different way of working. Several things here. So the first is that we are actively creating the environments and processes to upskill people. We have a whole team that's dedicated to AI ops and enablement. A significant pillar of that is our learning and development program. It is getting staff across the tools, formal training, role-based training, to create the environment for every single person to be able to learn what they need to learn to be the most AI-enabled versions of themselves. But as part of this is also the expectation that everyone would come along that journey in sort of like the future vision of our company. And we're quite open with the fact that that might not be for everyone. And so if I'm transparent about it, some people have chosen to opt out because they are looking for more traditional work environments. One where, for example, they are pure people managers versus player coaches, which is kind of more what we're working towards now. And that's fine. At the same time, in our new hiring, we are actively looking for AI forwardness. We've got sort of certain things that we're looking for, certain signals of agency, certain signals of mindset around the use of AI. And so we're bringing those people in. And so I think there's a large group of people who are fully embracing this. And I would say most people are embracing this. They can see the future and they want to upskill and sort of start operating in this way. But not everyone, and that's fine. And I think many companies going through this journey will have to accept that fact. And I think that's fine. I think just like any other sort of technological change, there will be some people who embrace it, some who don't. And that's just something we all have to accept.
That's really interesting you bring that up, Matt, around it not being for some people, because I assumed coming into this conversation that as an AI company, you were always AI forward in everything you do. But I'm assuming it's just changed so quickly what is possible that you've had to bring people up to speed on what being AI forward is. So you've had to do a transformation internally, even though you were already an AI company.
Yes, that's totally right. I think we are fortunate in the fact that being an AI company, we have an employee base, a staff base who fully believe in the vision of what AI can do, certainly in the medical context. And that's proven. Our medical products are medical devices. They've gone through very rigorous testing, and it's proven that they are effective and that they're having the impact that we want. We're on that journey now of proving that AI transforms operations beyond just diagnostics, but our internal operations as well. Our staff are particularly receptive to this, and I think we really benefit from that. But it's still a big change because it's still different. It still has significant implications for the nature of work, the nature of career progression. And we're fortunate that people have almost all embraced this, but it has been a change, and it is still a change.
Yeah, really, really interesting. So back on the principles, I saw a post that you did around that you love AI amplifying your output professionally and making you feel superhuman. I was just wondering if you could touch on that side of AI in how you decide what to work on as the team, because I think one of the misconceptions that I've found, or at least what clients ask me for, is cost saving. Whereas I would love to hear a little bit around how you consider what to prioritize, in particular the making people superhuman part in what you decide to work on with the team.
It's a great question, and I think it's something that has come up many times for us as well. I think certainly there are use cases of AI tooling that can result in cost saving. That's for sure. As a trivial example, you can now build vanilla automations let's say scripts that can do things, you can build those very easily and they will continue to run and they'll be very cheap. And so there are domains in which there is cost saving available. But I personally think that this is the sort of myopic way to look at the potential of these tools. Really, if you think about what the company is doing, if we're able to move faster and do more, generate more revenue, as an example, the cost-saving component becomes a much less of a priority. And in fact, it's a very limited priority, right? There's only so much cost that you could ever take out. But there's really no limit to how fast the company could move. There is no limit. And we're taking more of that lens. So AI is helping every individual in the company do significantly more than they could before, and therefore the whole company is moving forward faster. And we are seeing this. We're seeing growth that's faster than before. We're seeing things being shipped faster than they have before. And there's a saying that revenue solves all problems. When you're growing, the cost saving does become less of a priority. So I think that's for most companies, like that is where most of the value will lie.
Can you put a bit more color on that? You're shipping more, you're getting more done. Have you got any examples or numbers that you can kind of illustrate the increase in pace?
There are lots of numbers that I can't talk about, but
Tell us the
let me
numbers.
share. Yeah, but let me share some typical things that this is stuff that people talk about. As an example, a sales representative can now manage more accounts at any given time. That's just true. A customer success person can manage more accounts at any given time. A greater number of support tickets are managed in an automated way. So you need fewer people managing a given ticket. But because you're growing faster, the number of tickets also increases. And actually, it's not necessarily that you need to reduce the size of those teams. It's just that those teams are much more valuable now. And so those are some examples. In the Harrison specific case, we are not overly focused on very narrowly scoped telemetry of ROI across the different functions, because we see that as quite a narrow view of what these tools do. As an example, no one is looking at what is the ROI on Microsoft Word. It's become such an ingrained medium in which we work that it's an obvious thing that people are going to be using this for word processing. And because we are using AI so broadly, we're thinking more of the same. We are measuring OKRs, we're measuring how productive people feel, we're measuring performance ratings, we're measuring NPS for the AI tools and the services we provide. If all those things are strong, more granular telemetry doesn't actually help that much. We can see that people are getting more productive. We need to invest more, and we don't need sort of second order, third order numbers to tell us that. And so that's the way we're approaching it.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. I'd love to know more about, in this section, around how you run this team at Harrison and how you're helping people get into AI and becoming AI forward. So I know you run an AI ops and enablement squad. You've mentioned the training. How do you, how are you doing it? What do you do?
Sure. Yeah, happy to share it. So maybe if I just step back and share sort of like the origin of this team. About midway through last year, we started to push harder on the internal AI adoption direction. This was probably quite a bit before most companies started to push quite as hard. But again, being an AI company, we're dealing with this stuff every day. I think we have close to a front row seat as to what's coming. And the way we did it was kind of like a skunkworks project, a small cross-functional team, representatives across the business, driving a few specific AI initiatives. We had an AI hackathon where staff would use AI tools to build things. We provisioned some tools. We did an AI week event with the engineering teams, getting them doing spec-driven development with some coding tooling, really as sort of a broader scale proof of concept that this thing is ready to now stick. And the signals were very, very strong. Adoption was great. And we, off the back of that, made the strategic decision. We are now in a position that we should formalize this into something bigger. And we set up this new team, the AI Ops and Enablement team. It's a sort of full stack cross-functional team that covers our infrastructure, so our systems and how they're all interconnected, our company knowledge, which we think of as sort of like our institutional memory, our data lake, a semantic layer so that staff can interact with our company knowledge in natural language. It covers AI tooling, sort of well, both AI tooling, but also custom apps that we develop. And it covers enablement. So enabling our staff to get their hands on the tools, use them safely, use them effectively. So those 4 pillars. And these somewhat overlap, but in the previous world, they overlapped they were living in different functions. And so there were, as I said before, sort of many handoffs between those functions. By bringing them all together, we can actually solve this problem in a holistic way. We can have our AI tooling interacting with company knowledge and taking actions on behalf of staff in our systems, because we have that full end-to-end view, and we can train staff to do that. And so we see sort of AI native business building as needing to span across those 4 pillars: infrastructure, knowledge, tooling, and enablement. And that's how we set up the team. So we have a person, primary person responsible for each of those different pillars. We really work full stack, very generalist, collaborative on everything. Like, everyone is multi-hatting by design, but we also have sort of owners of those pillars. At the same time, we have a network of sort of AI evangelists set up in each functional area, who are the subject matter experts for their domains. They are responsible for being the interface with those domains and our team. They are on the hunt for opportunities to automate processes, to build capabilities, and they sort of help us drive this agenda business-wide. So it's sort of both it's like a hub and spoke model across the business. I think this is the emerging best practice we're seeing across AI forward companies. A lot are deploying what they would now call forward deployed engineers across the different functional areas. We're just calling them AI champions. We don't want to sort of stick to a particular term yet, but this model is seeming to stick as the way to do this, and that's how we're doing it. And so far, it's bearing a lot of fruit.
I love it. You've got a new department focused on infrastructure, knowledge, tooling, and enablement. You mentioned full stack. Does that mean you've got like a developer, a data scientist, an ops manager? Is that what we're talking about here as a full stack team?
That's pretty much right. We have a data scientist, a full stack app developer, a previously sort of project program manager, operational person, an IT person. But again, we don't think of the roles in that way anymore. So this is their background. These are the sort of primary areas that they're responsible for. But everyone is operating in a much more generalist way. We're all collaborating on projects. We are all sort of collectively responsible. And I think that is the new way of working in this world.
Yeah. I'm talking in old money. Then, so let's say you have a knowledge project, which involves putting a whole bunch of meeting notes into a database. How does that then interface with I assume you still have a data team as well. So how do they connect when you've got potential joint ownership of an asset like a data warehouse?
So this question depends a little bit on the specific context. Certain systems will still be owned by certain functions. As an example, our finance systems will still be owned by finance, and all the data within them would still be owned by finance for all the same reasons as before. There's proprietary data in there. It requires a lot of deep expertise to manage those systems. However, we set up the relevant knowledge to be accessible through our data warehouse and through our sort of semantic layer with all the right permissions baked in so that other staff can interact. And so we have a person owning the knowledge sort of layer, the infrastructure, the data warehouse, but the source systems of record might still be owned by the specific functions that sort of live and breathe in those systems. And so that's still clear. There is the question of sort of like new build. So for example, we want to build new reporting infrastructure to understand how our products are working in particular hospital groups after product launch. This is something that could naturally sit with many teams. The way we set it up is our team is very much an enabling team. So we would set up the infrastructure. We would make sure the data pipelines are set up in the right way. We would make sure that the right people can access the end product and the users are trained up. But the actual ownership of, let's say, the reporting, building dashboards, using them going forward would be the relevant frontline teams who are sort of owning that day to day, as a concrete example. We think of this team very much as an enabling team. So in the context of a data project, we would own the data pipelines, the infrastructure to manage the system, onboarding the staff members who are going to be using the system going forward. But the goal is as quickly as possible to get it into their hands, the end user's hands, to then own it and run it and be able to build on it going forward, versus this team continuing to own anything in sort of run mode or BAU mode. We're very much a build the system versus run the system team. And I think that's the way you need to do this if you want to scale AI across a business.
Got it. Which links, I think, nicely onto a follow-up question there about reporting, motivation, responsibility. So we've covered people, which is a full stack team who are able to work across all of the business. We've covered the tools, and there's some new tools and how the ownership is of those. But organizationally, how do you manage the responsibilities? So it's an enablement layer, much like you would have a central operations or a business operations team. But if they don't have ownership of like a metric of the business, it's hard to manage like in the existing structure. So how do you deal with that? Like what do you report into leadership, and how do you ensure that the team is productive?
That's a great question. So we do have OKRs. Every squad in the business has a set of OKRs that they are fully accountable for, and they roll up to a smaller set of company-wide OKRs. So it's sort of best practice OKR setting, and that's no different from our squad. So we don't own a commercial number well, we do own a budget. Every squad owns a budget, so we do own a cost number, but we own OKRs that point in the direction of building an AI native business. The first one is part of our job is to provide a service to the rest of the business. And so we have an internal NPS. We have a goal of providing sort of high level of service to every other squad, and we would measure that through NPS. We have an OKR around percentage of sort of material processes that are automated through the work that we do, that are unlocked. And one of the big things that AI unlocks is process automation. And so we are sort of measuring that. We have a sort of yes/no OKR on reporting that is enabled through like a self-service natural language way. There's a vast number of sort of business critical reports, information that staff would need to be able to access to do their work on a regular basis. And so we sort of have a goal of hitting a certain number of those and getting them done. And so there's several metrics like that we do own, and we're sort of managing our team performance against those things.
Got it. Perfect. So it's structured as an internal support function. So you do well when the people are served well, and you also have some measure of the productivity that comes about as a result of the work you do. So number of automations, the amount of time saved by those automations or value generated, and they just keep on ticking up and compounding. And yeah, looks really cool. Awesome.
100% right. Well, one that I didn't mention, but it's still a bit in formation phase, but I can see that it will be a core to how we operate quite soon. We're just still tweaking exactly how it works. Is that measure of sort of AI fluency and AI maturity across the business? It's very difficult to measure, but we need to measure tooling maturity, mindset of squads, capability of squads to use these tools. It is currently still subjective, but we have a goal of getting everyone to hit our sort of competency baseline, where 100% of every person in the company meets an AI fluency baseline. And part of the work we do is to kind of get everyone to that baseline. Some of it will just be ensuring that everyone's gone through sort of the vanilla L&D program, but there is more than that.
It's obvious what you've got to do. You benchmark the AI models, you've got to benchmark your team.
That's a good suggestion, actually.
I'm not sure what test would go for that. If people game the numbers.
Yeah.
Overfit, cool. That was brilliant. I really love what you've done there and how you've set up the internal structure. It's the first time I've heard that, and I think it makes a huge amount of sense. So yeah, well done. I'm really excited to see how that goes and whether this is the model that sticks at other companies or what else. Because it's not just a period of redesigning the work, it's a period of redesigning the organization, because as you were saying before, this military idea of roles being stacked up only works when the roles are the same. But what you just described and corrected me on was the roles have changed. And so the organization doesn't work because it was a stack of roles and responsibilities, which has now fallen apart and is being reassembled in different shapes. And this is the shape you've come up with. So very, very exciting. Cool. I just want to touch then a little bit on entry-level roles in this new organization, because it's a worry that as we become more capable through being able to use AI, that a lot of the work that would go to entry-level people is no longer necessary. And so there has been, there's been numbers which reflect a reduction in graduates going into roles as a result of a broader kind of concern about layoffs as a result of AI. I just wanted to ask you, do you still need entry-level people?
That's a good question. This is a deep one. And I should say, I am going to be speaking on behalf of myself when answering this, not on behalf of the company, although because I'm sort of leading AI enablement, a lot of what I say will no doubt align. I think there's a lot to say on this one. Part of the impact that we're seeing in entry-level work is that previously a lot of entry-level work was done by people because it was the cheapest way to do it, but not necessarily because those people couldn't do anything else, if you understand what I'm saying. There's important work that needed to be done. We need to get that work done in an efficient way. And so these are the people that would do it. But it's not because those people could not do more cognitively interesting work or creative work. And so I think that's one great benefit of this AI-enabled world, where a lot of information pushing, administrative work, which is really not suited for anyone, will no longer need a person to be shepherding it. And that does free up those people to do work that they would have been doing in 2 years' time anyway. So I think there is that. At the same time, an AI-enabled, more experienced person can do a lot more. There is no doubt about that. Orchestrating agents in a small team allows an individual to do a lot more. And I think this does mean the demand for sort of more junior, less experienced people with a less sort of developed judgment. There is currently less demand in many domains for that. We are not hiring as many very junior people as we were in the past. And I know that's true of many companies. And so I do think that this is something that is being seen. At the same time, younger, more junior people often come in with an advantage in that they tend to be able to upskill more quickly on the tools. And that is something that's more difficult for more senior people who are more set in their ways. And within Harrison, we're very lucky that everybody is so AI forward. We've had staff embracing these tools, but that's not true in many, many other organizations that I've spoken to, where the level of resistance is still very high. And in those domains, young, less experienced people with more energy and time to upskill quickly in the tools have an advantage. And so there's a whole complex of things that are interplaying here. I personally don't know where it will net out, but I absolutely acknowledge that in certain domains it is a challenge, and that hiring has slowed significantly for graduates directly out of university, for example.
Yeah. I think it's possible at the moment to reduce hiring of people because teams can do more. So if you just look at it at a point in time, that's something that companies could do. But slowing down in a period of incredible growth is, I think short-sighted. So there's this realignment in what these roles are and what a graduate can do. And I love that perspective you just brought of, grads aren't only good for doing the entry-level stuff, that they were the cheapest doing it. And I can talk to my time when I was the graduate and I was doing the basic stuff, and I very much felt I could do more than the basic stuff. Right, let's move on. Let's go into tools and automations. This is more of a rapid fire section where I'd love to know more about what has been a huge unlock at Harrison or personally, and then what hasn't worked, either for good reasons or for reasons that you just haven't quite gotten there yet. So first of all, what was an automation or an implementation of AI which has been game-changing at Harrison?
There are so many at this stage. we're uncovering more on a almost daily basis. So we've provisioned several tools to all staff. One is just standard, we have Claude for all staff. Engineers use it for coding purposes. We have CoWork that anyone can access. And we're just encouraging staff to use it. It's fairly powerful. It's fairly integrated with their systems. And there are many great things that have come out of that, just in this sort of distributed usage way. People are using it to write scripts to automate little parts of their work. People are using it to synthesize information. So all of those good things. More substantively, in experimenting with a range of different off-the-shelf AI tools, we found that none quite fitted the unique set of use cases and systems that we have. And so we went on the path of building our own internal tool, which it lives within our Slack. Staff interact with in Slack. It is deeply connected to almost all of our systems. It has sort of inbuilt organizational memory, both on an organizational level and a personal level. It's a very, very powerful system that is deeply agentic, directly accessible via Slack. It is called Pensive. Staff can at Pensive in a Slack channel and it will respond or take action. They can do it personally or collectively in a group. You can have scheduled skills running to take action on a regular basis on your behalf. And the number of interesting things and powerful things that have come out of Pensive have been, it's super overwhelming. To drive adoption, we've set up an internal channel. Pensive wins. Staff post their wins. They share their learnings. And, we all upvote. We give awards based on what's going well. And there have been some phenomenal things that have come out of this. Everything from building sort of a little micro application to run a customer demo to completely automating business cases or tender submissions, a whole range of things. And so this is a button, we're still developing it. We have a person working full-time on building this tool out. And, I'm very excited to see where it goes. But I think having this very, very powerful tool in the hands of all staff in a shared space has been an absolute game changer. And we couldn't get that off the shelf anywhere.
So what makes Pensive different from a personal agent like OpenClaw?
A couple different things. I think the most important thing is its connection to our institutional memory. So one level of that is that it is deeply connected to all of our internal source systems, much more than we would be comfortable letting a third-party tool connect to. It can access any Slack message that a user can access. It can read your emails, your Confluence pages, all the different source systems in a way that respects your own access permission. So as long as you have those correct, we're comfortable that your version of this AI can only see what you can see. We wouldn't be comfortable giving a third-party system such deep access. The other sort of step change above that is beyond just access to the source systems, we've built an internal sort of memory layer. There's a knowledge graph that's maintained in a particular way, such that over time, this system compounds. It compounds for you individually as a person, but also collectively as an organization. And these sort of two knowledge graphs interact. And so it gets better and better and better. It learns over time. It can answer questions faster. The sort of error rate on actions reduces and gets better. And again, this would be something, presumably it could be built with third-party systems. It would be difficult and we would kind of end up doing the same amount of work to end up in the same place. And so this has been extremely valuable. And then, of course, because we fully own it, we can have all the fine-grained controls we want. We can have the exact sort of inbuilt skills and capabilities. We can have the exact user interface we want with staff. And all of these things have been completely worthwhile investing a full-time focus in.
This is really great. In episode 2 of this podcast, and the parallels between what you just said about Pensive as the unlock compared to Josh the other week, who was talking about Cosgrove, is amazing. They both really worked because you got the data layer sorted. And as a result of that, people are able to draw a lot of connections. Josh was talking about being able to really get meeting notes to work because it knew what had gone on in other meetings and other bits of work. And I see that as one of the threads of what's really worked for you about Pensive. I also find it amazing that I'm speaking to 2 AI native companies and both of them have had to build this themselves. So if anyone's listening who wants to work on an AI startup, maybe this is a good place to start because whatever is out there isn't good enough. Personally, I saw you posted about a second brain, which looked through your messages and email and your Jira tickets. Is that a personal system that you've built? And could you talk a little bit to that and what you found so useful about it?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, so that is a personal system I've built. Partly it is with the mindset of, there are a certain number of us that need to be experimenting kind of beyond the standard tools that are out there in order to be able to inform what direction to take the company. And so partly it is that, I think it is absolutely the wrong thing to be doing for everyone to be running OpenClaw on a Mac Mini, but some people do need to be doing that to sort of figure out, what's going to stick. And so partly it is in that vein. And a lot of the learnings from doing this personally have then flown through to what we're doing within the company. But yes, this is something personally. I don't think it is the long-term way that AI second brains will be run, but it's starting to scratch at the surface of something that I think a lot of us will have, which is our own personal sort of context and knowledge layer that's connected to many of the systems we interact with. A harness to manage an agent or agents that can interact with that knowledge layer and start taking actions on our behalf within those systems. And then on top of that, you can build, scheduled tasks. You can build all manner of different things. And so this is something I've built personally. It is currently using Cowork as the sort of harness. It uses Anthropic's models. For the knowledge layer, it's essentially a big database of markdown files structured in a really nice way that are automatically generated through the agents by connecting to source systems. So every single message I ever send, every email that I ever send or receive can be read. Every meeting that I do is sort of transcribed through both Zoom and Granola. I talk to it. I sort of dictate to it very often, on the bus on the way home from work. It will ask me some questions where it's unsure, and it sort of self-manages this big knowledge layer that has now become very sophisticated. And if I ask it to write something on my behalf, it comes out very close to what I would write. It can make first draft decisions on my behalf. It can help advise me on certain topics. All those vanilla things, and then a lot more, such as understanding where I might have knowledge gaps or where there are areas in my workflow that I could improve, and just proactively advising me or just doing those things on my behalf. And so that's something I've been running for several months now. It's grown to something fairly big, but it's indispensable. It's sort of the primary medium in which I do most of my work now, directly through this medium.
I've got 2 follow-up questions on it. So first of all, just the technical side. You mentioned it's a bunch of markdown documents. Is that like a Karpathy wiki, the structure that he suggested?
It's similar. It's not the same, but it's a similar principle to what he's got there.
So to explain that, the Karpathy wiki was an idea where you would feed a wiki the source material, such as transcribed meeting notes, and then let the AI deal with the rest of it. Because the problem with wiki is a human element, because you've got to keep it up to date. So it then created tiers of information up to the point where you would read it. So I've actually set one up as a CRM, mostly for work. And it does a really good job of keeping track of actions and hypotheses and other pieces of information. And I'll only ever read the top layer. And then it has all that context that it can go into when you ask it to do something. So it's an emerging form of having information structured. The thing I'm actually really looking forward to playing around with, and talking of having those kind of crazy people who go a bit far with AI. The next thing I want to do, because I spend Fridays usually just on the tools, is GBrain, which is a Gary Tan, the president of Y Combinator tool that he just released. And he's done a Karpathy wiki, but he's added on top to it a vector database. And the benchmarks that I've seen reported on the GitHub page is that it's just a lot better for search because it's attacking it from 2 angles. So yeah, I'm probably going to borrow that and redesign my own personal wiki and see if I can build a GBrain that works for me. So watch this space. I'll share the repo afterwards if you don't know about it.
I think that's a good idea. We from the sort of company perspective, from Pensive perspective, we've explored all these different versions, and that is where we've landed. So we do have a sort of very big vector database
Right.
inside our sort of company knowledge system. We also have a knowledge graph, and these two things interact. I don't have this in my own second brain, but it's worked very well for the company, and so it might be something that I also choose to sort of backwards adopt into my own second brain.
What's a knowledge graph?
It's just a representation of knowledge. Nodes are sort of facts or objects, and connectors are sort of relationships between them. And it's a way to represent knowledge. So, for example, you might have people connected by several nodes, such as friends, as an example. And so you can build a big representation of your organizational knowledge, almost like a memory, which can be very efficient to query. So you ask a question, it can find the answer very quickly in the knowledge graph. It can find connections between pieces of knowledge that might not have been present in any source document, but are in fact there. And so it's just one way that we're looking at sort of building out institutional knowledge.
So one of the things that I loved about the personal knowledge base you've built was around a coaching loop and helping you get better in meetings, improving for any gaps in empathy and knowledge. I think that sounds brilliant. What have you learned, and how did you get it to do that?
So this is one of my favorite aspects of this whole setup. And maybe zooming out again, I think with any technology, it's often very easy to use them in a way that result in atrophy of your own skills. So as a silly example, there was a time in which I would get into the car, put on Google Maps and start driving, and I'd get to the destination, but over time you forget how everything is connected. You have a very bad spatial awareness because that part of your sort of cognition atrophies. And I think with AI tooling, there's an extremely high risk of this happening in many dimensions. People outsourcing all of their thinking to AI tools, and you end up in this state, the worst state of all, which is one LLM talking to another LLM using two humans as the interface, which is just the last thing you want. So I think it's really important to very actively think about this and think about how you can actually also use these tools to help you develop in ways instead of to atrophy. And with all of this context available in a second brain, there's a really easy implementation of this, which is to get agents to look specifically, based on your context, for knowledge gaps. So things you should know about that it seems you don't know about, but then also anything else like empathy gaps, EQ gaps. So I have my agents on a weekly basis looking through everything I've written, everything I've said on calls to identify these things, and then write a small briefing for me identifying these are your 2 or 3 sort of like EQ type gaps that I think you should be aware of. And these are some knowledge gaps. For the knowledge gaps, it actually does some research and writes a bit of like an article that will help me plug those gaps. For EQ, it suggests some things to be aware of and some things to do. So as a simple example, I think it was this week or it might have been last week, it pointed out to me, look, you have actually shifted a meeting with this person several times over the past few weeks because it knows my calendar. And it's probably a really bad experience for them that you keep on shifting their meeting. It will make them feel like you don't value their time. And I reflected on it, and it was totally right. It's absolutely what was happening, but it was something that I was completely unaware of. And no one would have ever pointed that out unless that person took the agency of telling me, because we're the only 2 people who knows that interaction. And there are 100 things like this that would go completely over my head, but now I'm able to be aware of them and sort of address them. And so this has been a really great way to sort of continuously augment and improve in a way that's very targeted to myself.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I find it particularly exciting when instead of just thinking about how AI can make things be done more cheaply, we think about how it can help us do things better. And that's, really, really exciting. And maybe the future with AI, instead of it telling us what to do, it just makes us better humans. I think that future is still very much open to us.
I think so. I mean, if you look at, there is a lot of fear about AI in the future of work, but at the same time, a lot of the work that people think that they want to do involves sitting for 8 hours behind a computer, moving information around. Nobody really wants to do that work. We want to connect more. We want to be more creative. We want to exercise our judgment. And I think used well, this is a moment that we will be able to start doing that a lot more. And I think that's a very bright future.
Yeah, definitely. I found it the most creative time of my professional career. It's been incredible. Being able to not only just manage things, but create having this whole new skill set of building apps and databases and all these things which were closed off to me because that wasn't part of my skill set have been opened up. I find I'm able to do a lot more. I'm running my own apps, my own company, and doing a remarkably good job at the bits that I have no rights doing by my training. Let's talk a little bit around on the tools and automations. There's some great examples of things that have worked well, but on the other side, is there anything which hasn't been working for you guys at Harrison?
That is a good question. Look, I think in an experimental phase, it's actually important that you do things that don't work so you can learn. And so I would surely say a lot of the things that we've tried have not led to anything that we would choose to adopt on a permanent basis. But in this phase, that's a good thing. I think the important thing is to take calculated risks and sort of have a deliberate sloshing about phase, an experimental phase, and to learn from it before starting to scale up really broadly. So several things that didn't work. Earlier on, we tried several different third-party AI tools that we provisioned on a fairly broad basis that didn't end up sticking. I maybe don't necessarily want to say what the tools are, but tools, so AIs that live within particular platforms, and kind of turn them all on because we wanted to sort of get everyone upskilled on AI. And they were very limited. They could do very specific, narrow things, but the ROI on those things was definitely not there. So that's one of them. There has also been what I mentioned earlier, the last thing you want is a world in which you have two LLMs talking to one another using two humans as their interface. And there has been some of that. And, you get a proliferation of very low quality content, much more documentation than is actually needed, sort of small ideas buried in large reams of text. And so we've been really active in sort of fighting against that in how we think about enablement and how we think about training. But nevertheless, we have gone through that journey of sort of document proliferation, comms proliferation. We haven't had any major incidents or anything like that. We've been very careful, but I do think those are also risks, and we will see sort of bigger things going wrong in companies that choose to provide high degrees of agentic access without thinking about it. We haven't had anything like that.
Let's talk a little bit around that. You said you don't want to AIs just talking to each other. I see this as the problem with work slop. You have one person produce some work which has been primarily done by AI, and one of the features of AI work is it tends to be quite long, which then gets passed to a manager to review. The manager looks at it, is like, I can't deal with that. And so they get AI to summarize it and to give feedback. And before you know it, the two people are just, two AIs speaking to each other. What have how do you get on top of that? And, you mentioned earlier that you've been trying to reduce the number of touch points. So maybe just connect the two AIs to give the feedback earlier. But I mean, what else are you doing to avoid work slop?
Firstly, I love we haven't used the term work slop, but I think I might adopt that because that is definitely something that we would very strongly try and guard against. Look, I don't know if we've taken any specific measures targeted necessarily at that. What we have done is we've maintained a very, very high quality bar. So one benefit of AI tooling is it does allow you to produce output faster. As I said earlier, I think the primary benefit is that it lets you do better things, better work. And so quality should go up. And I don't know that we've sort of, on a broad basis, tried to implement anything in particular, but we hold a very high quality bar. And I think no managers are going to be tolerating work slop for too long. I would be interested if you've seen anything that sort of is very effective in preventing it, because it is definitely something that does happen.
One approach I've gone for is feedback loops in AI. So for instance, I was doing a proposal generator, and I found that it would follow my instructions, but then I'd have to edit it a bunch and give a load of feedback. So instead of me giving feedback as I would on a piece of work, I instead gave a set of criteria, and then I had a a new agent spin up, which used that criteria, reviewed the work, fed back to the original agent, and then it did a few loops. That actually got me a lot further along, and it respected the things that I cared about in that particular piece of work, whether they were length or tone or the points that were covered. So I found that got me a lot further along. So that's one approach that I've been using.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. One thing that we have tried to do is to really enable staff to understand how to do best practice prompting of these tools. I think if you prompt very well and you're clear about what you want to come out the other end, you can get a long way. And if you prompt badly, slop comes out. And so I think that has been quite helpful. But we haven't sort of done any particular agentic review sort of bots or anything like that. So that is definitely something that we might think about.
Brilliant. Okay, let's talk a little around the future of AI. As I get the feeling you're going to have some feelings on this. So the future, what's next in AI and for Harrison? I saw in a post that you said we'll look back in a few years and consider today's approach as anarchic. I was wondering if you could talk to that and let us know where you think it's going and why we'd look back and see the approach we're taking now to be old-fashioned.
Yeah, for sure. I do have many, many thoughts on this, and some get sort of reasonably technical. So let me start with that post in particular. So that post was referring specifically to within the healthcare context, the radiology context. I had a personal experience in which my wife fractured her spine, was incorrectly sent home after her CTs showed up clear, when in fact she had 3 spinal fractures. Why this is anarchic is because having humans spend 8 hours per day staring at pixels on the screen to try and spot tiny little lines on a CT scan, that's data processing, and that's something that already AIs can do significantly better than the human eye, and yet it's taken a while to get adoption. So the technology is absolutely there. It's proven. It has great impact to benefit to patients, and not adopting it results in cases like I experienced with my wife, which was very, very difficult. And we were fortunate that she's okay, but many people in those cases don't turn out okay. So that is anarchic. That is something that will change substantially, and we won't have humans performing that role in the same way. More broadly speaking, I think there is every reason to believe that the capabilities of AI to do more general digital work will increase substantially, to the point where most of the tasks that we sort of pride ourselves with cognitively can be done via an AI. There are technical reasons to believe this. I think scaling laws that we've seen with large language models show that we're still very much on the trajectory of, if you increase this number of parameters, you increase the amount of training data, you increase the amount of training time, the models will improve. And we're seeing no evidence of slowdown on that front yet. On that basis, and on a time basis, because we're building more data centers and we're able to train larger models faster, we should actually expect acceleration. And so on that basis, for general cognitive work and digital work, we should certainly expect that the pace will continue to increase from here. It might top out at some point, but we are now at the stage where even if we were to turn off any training and never develop any new models again, I think both of us know the capabilities are already there to substantially transform work. So that's a given, purely on the basis of what's available today. And there's a very good reason to believe that things will get more powerful and better. And so the future will look very different. I'm very much optimistic. I think the way that we have constructed working environments, we've gotten used to it, but it's actually relatively unnatural. I mean, again, I mentioned earlier, sitting for 8 to 10 hours in front of a computer, developing carpal tunnel, not interacting with people as much, pushing information around. Many people pride themselves on this today, but I think that is actually not the best way to be a human. And what my hope is in this sort of more AI-enabled future is that we will be liberated from that, and we will be able to do things that are far more human in a way that's beneficial for the vast majority. There will be some bumps along the way. We'll have to figure some things out, but the future should be very, very bright. And so that's the future I envision for the future of work, the future of where all this is going.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope your wife's okay. That sounds very serious.
It was serious. She's recovering well. She's going to be okay.
That's good. Good. Well, and what a motivation as well to work on medical imaging. It's a real hero backstory. Maybe if we peer into your crystal ball for a little bit longer, I love this positive vision of AI, which stands against, I think, the general public sentiment of AI at the moment, which is predominantly negative. What do you think life will look like if you could describe it, a day? I'll let you choose the time period, maybe 10 years from now, how we will be affected by this ability to have commoditized intelligence.
I think the only really honest answer here is that nobody really knows. I think you can opine on various visions of the future, and many people do, but really nobody can know for sure. And even in prior technological revolutions, the internet as an example, we knew that the world would change in substantial ways, but very few people could predict exactly in which way. As a trivial example, the internet is sort of upstream from businesses like Uber and Airbnb, but those weren't what people had in mind when they thought about the impact of the internet. And I think similarly, into a larger extent, this moment will lead to a future that we can't quite grasp right now. My optimism, my positivity in all of this comes from the fact that if you look at all prior technological revolutions, after a bit of a rocky period in figuring things out, things have gotten substantially better for everyone. And I don't see why this would be any different. There are certainly risks, and we need to navigate those risks. But at the end of the day, this is a really powerful capability that we will get to deploy to solve the problems that we care about. And I don't see how that won't end up benefiting everyone in a way that we can't even fathom today.
That's brilliant. No, I think that's a really wonderful, positive view of the future. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing it, Matt. Thank you for coming on the podcast. You've shared an incredible vision of not only how to get a company to become AI native, but also a positive future for humans and AI. So yeah, thank you so much for being a guest.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.